Fergus Crawley, welcome to the Live on Form podcast.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to chatting things through.
Yeah, so Fergus, you and I have spoke briefly, but I'm a big fan of what you do. Let me for our community just probably nail down what that is, because you do a lot. So I'm not sure how you'd classify yourself, but I guess if we say you're a hybrid athlete, you're founder of Omnia Performance, you're the host of the Modern Mind podcast. You are associated also with Gymshark, like the Black Box Fitness, and other kind of brands that I guess work with your, within your lifestyle. But you're also a big mental health advocate as well, and you do a lot of work around raising money for, men's mental health charity. So I guess, in your own words, how would you describe what Fergus Crawley does? What are you?
This is a question I've been wrestling with quite openly this week, actually, because somebody did ask me on Tuesday, day one of moving into a new office, what did you do? I just panicked. I defaulted to an athlete first because, one, I think in the back of my head, I thought that means I'll ask a follow-up question, which will give me more time to think about what to say next. But I'd say there's three pillars to what I do. One is the athletic side of things, which is, I'd call myself an athlete adventurer, a hybrid athlete / adventurer, in the sense that I like to push my own boundaries. Those boundaries happen to be things that people can engage with. I like to do that across the strength and endurance spectrum, which is something that had previously been considered almost impossible, I think. But through proper, effective, considered analytical programming, it's not impossible. It's just a bit more difficult and a bit more trial and error. That has led us to launch Omnia Performance, which is pillar number 2, which is our online hybrid coaching business where we look after clients one-to-one, just about to release templates as well. But we're quite unique in the sense that we understand and have walked the walk, I guess, in terms of how to balance strength, speed, and endurance across a high level, across the three. And it's something that we're fascinated by, something that we love to get people on board with, and they enjoy doing it as well. So why not do more of it, eh? And then part 3 is the modern mind and the mental health charity side of things, which is I suffered from depression for 2 years. I ended up attempting suicide in May of 2016 as a result of keeping that suffering entirely to myself. Lessons learned, everything, recovery has got me to where I am now. And then in 2018, I basically embarked upon my first Movember campaign to raise money and awareness for men's mental health and suicide prevention. Long story short, that snowballed out of control. I've kept falling into positive impacts and positive interactions by accident, just by saying yes to everything and flying by the seat of my pants. But it's become something I'm very, very passionate about. And that has led me to do a lot of public speaking, a lot of engagement, a lot of events, which is principally what the Modern Mind does as a business, but it is also where I host the podcast. So it's where I do a lot of my corporate and school speaking as an individual, just sharing my story. But I also have about 30 to 40 people ready to go to be placed into those schools and corporates to share their story, because I'm firmly of the belief that you can have as many PhDs, master's degrees, qualifications as you want, and you can share and relay this information. And especially with kids, the information is only as valid as the context behind it is. And I think without a person there providing a bit of human context, the information doesn't land where it necessarily should. So that's the aim of the business from that sense, in terms of we want to provide the context to the information that's available to us all from a mental health and a mindset point of view, but to put people at the forefront of it, because at the end of the day, we are all people, we are all human beings, and my mistakes were forgetting that, in simple terms. So that wasn't a succinct answer. So you can tell I'm still wrestling with who I am, what I do, but there's lots of pillars that are all quite stinging concurrently at the moment, which is exciting because I love every single one of them, and I've found myself being lucky enough to be following things that I'm passionate about.
No, I think wrestling with who you are, I think that's what we all do, right? And I think in your 20s, you're still in your 20s. I think that's what your 20s are for. Listen, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm still not quite sure. So rest assured, it's not something that you can unpick simply and it goes away. So, and I think, education and understanding ourselves and our, the human part of us is kind of a big thing, and it's an ongoing journey, and it never really stops, and nor should it stop, really. So, but I guess for our community, let's unpick each one of those, probably individually, starting with your hybrid athlete. You've touched on that a little bit, but tell us what if there is a regular week, tell us what a regular week would look like in let's say you're not training for a specific event, you're a hybrid athlete, and you want to remain on form in each element of your training, what would a regular week look like?
Yeah, so I think you've kind of nipped it in the bud in the sense that it's obviously variable depending on what event I'm training for, how many disciplines I'm trying to balance all at once. But in principle, the way that we program and the way that our methodology involves balancing intensity and volume across a range of disciplines. And the way that we do that is we concentrate the highest amount of intensity at the start of the week and the highest amount of volume at the end of the week. And those invert as the week goes on. So in practical terms, what that means is your heaviest, fastest, shortest sessions are at the start of the week, and your slowest, steadiest, longest sessions are at the end of the week across those disciplines. So whatever I'm training for, generally speaking, my Monday will always be a heavy lower and some form of interval work, whether that's on my feet, on the bike, or in the pool. Tuesday will almost always be an upper, followed by something similar, whether it'll basically be the same again, but in a different discipline, AM, PM. And I'll always do my weight training first. Wednesday will tend to be steady tempo work on my feet. Whatever I'm training for, as the running is a fundamental part of everything that I do. And there'll sometimes be some turbo trainer work in there as if I'm training for a triathlon. But the premise of Wednesday is kind of this just below threshold heart rate, steady, intense work for up to an hour, up to 90 minutes, maybe split across two disciplines.
Okay.
Thursday will be a full body session or a rest day, depending on what my volume is across the week. Friday will be some form of strength endurance or pre-fatigue session to basically, the premise of it is when you're balancing these disciplines, you can't rely on the mileage that you would be able to rely on if you were just training for an endurance event per se, because you're putting other inputs into your body. So you need to try and be more creative and effective with the way in which you choose exercises and select the way that you execute them, because they can all feed into one another in some way. So a Friday session will be a pre-fatigue, whereby the aim is to basically accumulate fatigue in the relevant areas that you are weak in the disciplines that you'll be practicing on the Saturday. This is how I've been doing things anyway for this training cycle. And with that fatigue, you can then hit general fatigue systemically on the Saturday sooner than you would have done had you just been doing it as a steady state aerobic work. So it basically means that you can make your weight training and your strength endurance work more relevant to the task at hand from an endurance perspective, but make it as equally valuable as an assistance exercise for the strength stuff at the same time. And what that does is it means that when you hit that general fatigue sooner, you are then becoming more efficient whilst under fatigue at a point sooner than you would have done had you just been relying on bike mileage or running mileage, for example, which means that my overall mileage at the end of the week in the endurance activities that I'm training for, using an Ironman as an example, my running mileage wouldn't be as high as most people would expect. My bike volume wouldn't be as high as most people would expect, but that's because the nature of training like this means that you're just trying to hit your maximum recoverable volume each week and nothing more. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to go into each session with the intended purpose. So Sundays, I'll always take off or have an open water swim, just depending on what the weather's like, to be honest, most of the time. But I'm generally training Monday twice, Tuesday twice, Wednesday sometimes twice, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And my Saturday sessions are always long, steady state aerobic, anywhere from 2 hours to 10 hours it's been recently. And as part of those training cycles, there'll be big back-to-back weekends. There'll be specific race event weekends. Like I went up to Torridon to do a recce around the route for an event I've got next weekend, but to make my training, in inverted commas, as relevant to the task at hand as possible, because I was doing it on the right terrain, the right environment, the right weather, all these things. Because a key part of how we approach things is from a psychological point of view as well, in the sense that preparation for an event goes beyond the physiological adaptations, and you actually need to understand what comes around this corner, where am I going to get hit by a side wind, how's that going to affect me psychologically, because you need to prepare to tackle these things on. Because if you're hit with a series of unexpected outcomes, it's very easy to start to catastrophize things.
Yep.
And especially when it comes to ultra endurance and endurance events, that can be your downfall. So it's a tough balancing act, but I've been doing this for almost 4 years now with a really quite aggressive process of trial and error. The template in terms of the methodology we apply to a lot of our clients as well, but obviously the volume, intensity, exercise selection will be very dependent on their goals and how they execute it. But the premise is simple in that we extract their goals into percentages across the week of total volume and intensity, and then we balance those things so that they all try and speak to one another as cohesively as possible. for the minimum amount of work for the maximum return, so that they can recover from those inputs. We almost dehumanize people, where we spit data into them, see what comes out, and go again. But if any clients are listening, we do view you as humans, but it's just a case of the data analytics that goes into it is a very important part of how we approach things. Because if you're not recovering, you're not going to be adapting. If you're not adapting, you're just putting yourself through hell for no real reason. So
regarding your own training, you're very much, wanting to get strong or remain strong whilst also looking to, to increase endurance, be faster, at the same time as becoming stronger. That is, historically, that's almost been looked at as impossible, right? But it's not. Clearly, it's not, because this whole area of hybrid athlete and ultra running. I guess there were some extremely strong ultra runners. We've seen it even with the likes of someone like Goggins, who's got a big history in powerlifting. Yeah, and it's probably shifted all that now to just be ultra runner and all, but be 100% about endurance. What goals are your clients going after? Are they traditionally looking to do an ultra marathon? Are they looking to do a triathlon? Are they looking to do a powerlifting meet? Or are they quite similar to you in that they're looking to do a bit of both?
It varies, really. And that's kind of part of the fun, because we do have, I'd say the generalized intake that we have are people that are kind of a bit lost with what direction they want to go, but they know that they enjoy several things. But whenever they try and enjoy several things concurrently, they feel tanked all the time, and they realize that they're actually not enjoying it anymore. So they come to us basically saying, look, these are the stats that I've got. These are the things that I do. And 9 times out of 10, they've been pounding the pavement 5 days a week on top of all their weightlifting. So they're taking 100% of a running program, or 100% of a triathlon program, and 100% of a weightlifting program, and putting the two together. You don't need to be very good at maths to know what that equates to. That equates to you being taking naps on a Sunday afternoon and wondering why you blacked out and why your knees hurt so much.
Yeah.
But what we do is we help them balance that equation and help them understand that they can enjoy these things in the right dosage across the week, and then help them establish goals as they go. Some come with us to pipeline goals, but we kind of take it one step at a time. I'd say that's about 40% of our total client base, the one-to-one client base, that is. And then there's probably 20% have a very specific goal, and they'll come to us for their prep for that. So for example, we've got people, there's the evolution of used to go to bodybuilding.com forums and try and find where you could buy old formula Jack 3D, pure meatheads that have then turned to functional fitness, and then actually over lockdown found out they enjoy running. And now they're like, you know what, I just enjoy lifting, but I don't want to be huge anymore because I don't really see the point.
Do you think that's a generational shift, Fergus? Because that's an interesting point. My history is in natural bodybuilding, but I've never been a big guy. I've always just enjoyed lifting weights. I still do too much just lifting weights and not enough functional work, not enough endurance work. Hence, I'm in my mid-40s now, and I'm probably like a lot of guys who have lifted too much, lifted too many weights and not moved around enough. I'm tight at my hips, tight at my piriformis, tight at my hip flexors, tight at my lower back, weak in my hamstrings, weak in my glutes. Are you seeing a generational shift or is it a cultural shift from, is it just there's more awareness now around different styles of training? Or do you think you get to a certain age where you've, bodybuilded and it's been about aesthetics and how your abs look in the mirror and how your side tricep looks in the mirror? And then you get to a certain point in life, because we speak a lot about this, Human 24, you get to a certain point where you think, there's got to be more to this.
Yeah. I think I think it's not age. I think it's training age. And I think everybody goes through an evolution depending on where their entry point is, because there's people that might be in the 30s now that are finding health and fitness for the first time, but they find that through a bro split. And that's no worse inherently than anything else is, but that's just their entry point. But I think the constant throughout all of this is that people enter their own journey at a certain point. Where they enter that journey will then have a sense of permanence for a while, but it might have an expiry date. That could be somebody that does triathlons for years and years and years, and then they decide, actually, I can barely do a split squat without falling over. What's all that about? In the same vein, you've got people that are saying, well, I can bench 140 kilos for sets of 3, but I can't swim 100 yards. What's that about? And I think you can easily get absorbed into the progress that comes from being a beginner in these things, and you can make it a part of your life for a few years. But then, I mean, the phrase variety is the spice of life doesn't exist and isn't used day to day for no reason. It's why people ultimately change professions, change the way they approach and interact with certain things. And I think using the journey that I've been on, I know a lot of people that have been on the exact journey almost verbatim as me. So rugby into when sort of weightlifting and bodybuilding style training became fun, accessible, something you did with your mates on a Friday. I remember the days dry scooping pre-workout before a Friday evening session. It was the best part of my week.
Absolutely.
I was 17, 18 years old, just fantastic. And you just go in and just pound iron until you felt brutalized and then go home and look forward to the next day. But you can only do that for so long before you wonder, actually, what is this achieving other than what I think it's when the progress starts to slow down and that buzz of, yes, every week's progress, every week's progress, every week's progress, you're forced to confront the question of what does this give me as an individual? And when you confront that, you then maybe start to explore other avenues, being like, well, I actually enjoy playing golf. I might do a bit more of that. I actually enjoy riding my bike in the sunshine. Maybe I'll just start doing a bit more of that. And then before you know it, you've got a bit more aerobic capacity, and maybe you go on your first run and you surprise yourself at how well it feels, how steadily you cruise through it, et cetera, et cetera. And my biggest mistake for years was letting powerlifting prevent me from doing the things that I enjoyed doing. So the example I always use is I was hell-bent on my strength sessions in the sense that I wouldn't play a round of golf on a Saturday because I knew that I had a heavy squat on the Monday, and I didn't want to accumulate the 12,000 steps that a round of golf would be in my legs ahead of a heavy squat on Monday. But I enjoyed playing golf. I was saying no to it because of a scheduled in session for a sport that I wasn't really enjoying anymore.
Yeah.
And I think people become too comfortable with what they know, what is in front of them, and don't explore these options. But that's why functional fitness and group training, I think, has been the most influential change in the fitness industry in the past couple of years, because it gives people a community around what they do. And group fitness, generally speaking, it's not an art form. It's just redlining for 45 to 60 minutes with somebody telling you what to do in a group environment, in a group setting. It's not particularly training you for anything specific other than being better at group exercise training. Yes, there's some that are more technique focused. Yes, there's some that have a clear purpose at the end. But for the most part, it's just being with people, exercising, sort of getting the psychological benefits from exercise and feeling like you're a part of something. And I think that's where the generational thing comes in, because I think a lot of people have lost touch with the healthiness of the bro split bodybuilding approach, because it might not seem sustainable long term, because I think we've shifted a little bit away from the vanity that used to be associated with it to some degree, whereby people aren't as fussed about filling out extra large t-shirts anymore if they can go up a hill at a weekend. I think lockdown might have accentuated this for some people because it's helped them understand that they enjoy doing certain things more. I don't know, it might just be my age. There might still be loads of people out there thinking that the best thing they can do for themselves and their self-development is to train hypertrophy and to grow. But from my social circles, I know a lot of people have just stopped caring about it as much, and they've been doing more of what they enjoy rather than more of what they think will make them happy further down the line. It's an interesting one. I don't have the answers. I'm not the oracle on it, but my process was rugby, bodybuilding training, powerlifting, pure strength athletes, bit of endurance stuff, fell in love with it, but I still like the lifting, and here I am. So that's
it's
it.
It's a really interesting point you make, because going back to my natural bodybuilding days, I do the same thing as you. So I would avoid doing cardio, because back in the days, we're talking with my last comp 2008. So, we're talking probably early to mid 2000s. I would avoid doing cardio because we were told back then that you did cardio, you'd lose muscle. You'd catabolic. You would run your muscle off. That was what we were told. And listen, I was only light anyway, so I didn't have enough muscle to run off. So I was always terrified, doing cardio, doing endurance work, that I'd lose all this muscle. I've been trying to
busting the gut to gain as well, because
so hard to build. And I came from a background of sport. Much like you, rugby, football. I used to be a cross country runner. I was good at 800, and I enjoyed it. But I probably stopped doing it for 10 years because my dream was to be a champion natural bodybuilder. And I did all right in natural bodybuilding. Won a couple of shows. But looking back, it was ridiculous that I neglected things like cardiovascular health and didn't do things that I enjoy. I mean, even back to what it used to be, you know, back in my day. I mean, we wouldn't go out and socialize on a weekend because you want to get a certain amount of calories and nutrients, and you want to get a certain amount of sleep, and you wouldn't want the excess carbs. And that was really I feel like the fitness industry went through a really unhealthy time in terms of, you know, body image, in terms of nutritional and dietary issues.
Definition of fitness is still something that it confuses, because I think to the everyday Gen Pop person, fitness is perceived as how you look rather than how you operate and how you sort of exist underneath your skin. And being 6% body fat year round isn't healthy. Being ultra endurance events consistently probably aren't healthy long term for my joint health and all these things. I mean, there is a balancing act here, but I think education was the big missing link for years and years and years. And as you've said, you were told one thing and took it as gospel, and then you saw it in a forum and it was backed up, and the anabolic window, all these things, all these bro sciencey things that were taken as gospel for years and years and years. And I fell into all these traps as well. But I think the fitness industry moved away from being so marketing led to being more information and education led. And there's still that battle, because obviously that side of the world still exists. But I think there's much more reliable information out there and available now, and people are willing to do a bit more digging into the product and information that they're consuming. And I think that means that it's a much more holistic industry now, which I think is brilliant. It's still got a long way to come in many ways, because you don't see people without six packs in the front of men's health, really. But at some point, I'm sure we will, and we're going in that direction. But it's public perception is key. But I think within the industry, there's been a huge positive shift, and I think we're going in the right direction. And at the end of the day, if people are benefiting from it in their own lives, whatever their starting point, then that is a positive. But there comes a point where how you continue that journey becomes the bigger question. And what I want to ask you there was, if you thought about it now, why did you want to become a natural bodybuilding champion? What was the reason?
It's a really tough one. I think just because I naturally want to win. Yeah, I naturally wanted to win. Natural bodybuilding was a thing I was doing. I wanted to build a career within sports nutrition. You know, I knew I'd always want to go on and start my own brand, you know, which became PhD. So I kind of thought, listen, if I got good at natural bodybuilding, won a few trophies, built a name of credibility, then I'd be able to, you know, build a career around credibility. So I guess I was probably did it, you know, and this was before Instagram and before influencers and before you could put your pictures all over Instagram. And it was, you know, through kind of discussion forums. So I guess doing a few competitions, you know, doing all right, building some credibility around how I did that and how I dieted and the nutrition and the supplements I consumed probably helped build my name to a certain point within the industry at the time. So I think I probably did it. I did it firstly because I wanted to win. And I think secondly, I did natural bodybuilding because I wanted to be different when all my mates around me were taking gear. So I just wanted to be different. I'm just very stubborn.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be different. And I think, so it was probably a career thing. It was almost probably pre-Instagram days of, you know, I better look like I know what I'm talking about before I start talking about it.
No, I get that. I only asked because I suspected it'd be the winning thing. But then these are the questions I ask myself on a daily basis: is why did I choose one thing over the other when I knew I enjoyed the other things? Is always the question that I ask. It's which do you enjoy the most? But it sounds like what you actually enjoyed was the prospect of a successful career in the industry rather than necessarily the bodybuilding itself, which is an interesting way of reflecting on it. But yeah, I
think I also enjoyed. I think so. I'm quite naturally introverted, and I can remember always watching or listening to Dorian Yates. It was probably post his career, and how he used to kind of bury himself away in the evening and read articles and science and educate himself and spend hours working through his training program, almost kind of bury himself away, eat like a monk, and almost kind of embrace his introvertedness to build this real knowledge of understanding about how he could improve his physique. And I think, you know, bodybuilding and competitive bodybuilding attracts that kind of introverted nature, which I think is probably good, but then becomes bad, right? Because, you know, you go down this, it's a very selfish sport, extremely selfish sport when you're competing, and, you know, you push away social circles, you push away things you like doing, like sport, like golf, and, you know, healthy pursuits, because you become all consumed in this desire to, you know, sort of be the very best you can be at this one particular thing, which doesn't reward you in any way unless you're probably the best in the world, and there's one of those out of thousands and thousands of participants. So I think it was that attraction to kind of burying myself away and becoming an expert, and almost kind of punishing yourself by proving to yourself that you can restrict food, you can restrict social events, you can restrict social interaction.
Yeah.
And look at me, I can do that. And that became certainly towards the end of my competing, that became the competition. It was almost a competition of who could restrict themselves the most and go and live in this dark place the longest. And they were the best. And that is, looking back, it's an extremely unhealthy place, and has probably led to a lot of unhealthy narratives around food, around training, around life. Do you know what I mean? It's not it's not a good place to be.
No, that's ultimately my fear of going down that road was ultimately what sort of drew me to strength training rather than training for how I looked ultimately when I was about 19, it would have been.
Yep.
Because I knew in myself that the way my personality manifests itself would very quickly go down that road of self-destruction out of trying to force restriction upon myself. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing it in any way. I don't bash any discipline that people choose to pursue, but I think it's asking the question of why are you pursuing this discipline, and then actually what you do with that information that matters. And I've learned to be better at doing that now, and that's led me to doing a variety of things that I enjoy throughout the week, throughout the year. Yeah. And I feel like I've only got to my happiest version of my training self by exploring those avenues and actually learning that when that expiry date comes, it's not the end of the world. It just means you need to recalibrate and reframe the way in which you approach things.
Yeah. Back to your training. So the 500-pound squat, sub 5-minute mile, tell me about that, because that sounds, well, firstly, I could never do a 500-pound squat. So that in itself is pretty freaky. I think I got to 400 and something, but my form would not have been as good as yours. And then 5-minute mile, yeah, that sends cold shivers down my spine. So just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's something that was first coined at a CrossFit Level 1 education, within CrossFit Level 1. It's used as the example of the ideal CrossFit athlete would be able to do X and Y.
Oh, really?
Yeah, since the creation of CrossFit, it's been a part of the CrossFit Level 1 course, which I think is about 13 years old. And nobody's ever been able to do it. And I've always thought in the back of my head, for the past 3 years, I've thought that's something I've got in me at some point. But I never felt rushed to do it because I thought, I'll give it a go when I can, and is what it is. And then I got tagged in a post by Garage Gym Reviews because somebody had managed 500 pounds for an absolute grinder and then ran a 5:27 or something. And it started, who's going to be the first to do this? And all the comments were like, there's no way this is possible. Like all this stuff, which I saw and thought, oh, come on. It just depends on the challenge with CrossFit and the way that people approach it is they don't acknowledge the impact of additional volume elsewhere on the task at hand. And I think that's why it was perceived as something that wasn't possible for a long time. And then in the comments, it turned out there were a few Americans that decided, you know what, at our gym, let's give this a go. And I thought, well, if somebody else is going to give it a go, I might as well give it a chance, because it was just as the Keltman Extreme Triathlon had been cancelled. So during lockdown number 1 in 2020, I'd gone down south to stay with my parents because myself and my brother built a home gym there. This was when gyms were closed with no date on reopening. I thought, I've got all the weight I need. I've got a running track I can hop the fence on and have to ourselves every week. Let's give it a bash. So a FOMA coach said, right, let's recalibrate a little bit, give this a crack. And he said, yep, sound. Wednesday, we'll test your squat. Friday, we'll test your mile. The Wednesday, I squatted 220 kilos for a RPE 14 grinder. I think it was about a 9-second rep out of the bottom. It was awful. But I had done that without a taper. I'd done it in raised heel shoes, which are actually my weaker stance.
Right.
And it had gone up. So that made me confident. The squat was pretty much there with about 4 to 6 weeks of recalibration. And I tried the mile on the Friday, and I ran a 5:07, but with a rather favorable headwind. So I basically placed it at about 5:20 because I'd been training for the Keltman, which is basically an extreme Ironman in the Scottish Highlands. And I'd been training for a powerlifting competition mid-April as well. So I was well positioned in these disciplines. So I thought, okay, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. This was all whilst keeping up the long, steady endurance stuff on the weekend for Project Vertical in November. So I was training for something 5 months down the line at this point as well. So the Mondays were, from that point onwards, the Mondays were consistently my heavy squat day, just basic periodized, working up towards the target. But I know that without a taper, my training max, this is from years of powerlifting training, my training max is about 5 to 10% lower than my true max. So if I could squat 210, 215 for a single comfortably, or even challengingly with a taper, I'd have it in me. So I was basically working, everything was above the 190 mark from sort of the ranges of 5 to singles, sets of singles, for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And straight after the session, I'd be driving to the track 45 minutes away and doing soul searchingly destructive intervals at a top intensity. So the Mondays were hard sessions. Tuesdays was just upper and some recovery running. Wednesday was tempo runs focused on pacing within general running training. Then Thursday was squat specific assistance. Friday was, can't remember what Friday was in the end. I think it was bike work actually, just to keep some blood flowing. And then Saturday was my long and steady work. So I only really had 4 focused sessions on it during the week whilst keeping the engine stuff up. And I kept creeping. And the Americans kept creeping. And then he gave it a go, fell short. I thought, right, I've got 1 4-week training cycle. This is the day I'm going to give it a go. I've got someone to stick a GoPro on a scooter. I've got a track on a day that I know we're going to be able to get there. I can get everybody here to film it and make it happen. Let's set that date. And then the week before, the American gave it a go and managed to do it. So I thought, bollocks. Oh, well, what can you do that he can't? or what can you do that adds another layer to this? Because I've been training for the endurance stuff concurrently, I thought I had it in the cookie jar. If you get it done, run a marathon afterwards. No, run a 50K was what I actually, a sub 5 hour 50K was what I set out to do. So the day came, and honestly, because there'd been external pressure applied in my head, I was not confident I had the squat in me, even though I know from training experience, based on the numbers, it was there. So I hadn't put out on social media the night before, I'm going for it tomorrow or anything like that, because I didn't want good luck. I didn't want all this. I just wanted to go in, put Slipknot on and get it done. Yeah, I did. And it moved really well. I probably could have got 235, 240 on me on the day. So again, have faith in yourself when you know the information. But then went straight to the track. I brought a friend called Doug, who is a scrum half, very good scrum half, very good runner. I asked him 3 weeks before, Doug, can you just run a mile for me and see how quickly you can do it? He ran 4:53 or something. I was like, God's sake. So thought, do I want a pacer? Do I want an unpracticed pacer, or do I want no pacer at all? And I decided on the former because I wanted to switch off mentally and just follow somebody rather than look at my watch. But knowing the risk of Doug hasn't paced somebody on a mile before, so this could be interesting. My instructions were 113, 114, 115, then he'd drop off and I'd go. Those are 400-meter splits. Right. And we went 104, 111, 119, and then I had to go. So the 64-second lap, upon reflection, just claimed my soul. That put me in the bin from lap 3. But on a mile, anyone that's done one will know lap 3 is the one that matters, because at that point you need to make the decision, are you going to keep going at the intensity through this lap that means you hold the pace to then empty the tank, or are you going to scale back an hour and basically cut yourself off at the knees? So psychologically, lap 3 is always the toughest, and I was locked in. But I got to, Doug dropped off with 200 meters to go, and I had 120 meters where, honestly, up until that point, if you'd asked me what is absolute peak intensity, you have nothing left at all whatsoever, it would have been at the point 120 meters before I got to the finish. And I just thought, hold on. And I barely felt like I was moving towards the end. On the video, you can see I'm not really running. I'm more like aggressively pivoting my hips. Got over the line, tried to stop my watch, tripped because my legs just completely seized up. And then I was rolling about on the floor, like the scene from Family Guy where they all drink something that makes them sick, just rolling around in their own vomit. Because I was on the floor, immediately had a headache that was amongst the worst headaches I've ever had in my life. my body just wasn't reacting. I was like rolling around like a limp fish. And then I got up, threw up, and I was on the floor again for another 20 minutes thinking, how am I ever going to do anything ever again? And then I thought, I've got to drive everyone back to Edinburgh. So it was 40 minutes from finishing the mile before I got up and thought, okay, I can move properly and comfortably again now. So in terms of emptying the tank, that was it. And then I had no desire to give the sub 5 hour 50K a go. I hadn't said it publicly, so there was no like obligation. But I thought, not from an ego point of view, because we were perfectly respectful, myself and the American, throughout it. But it was, I thought, if I've done this in such close succession, I probably should add on another element. Otherwise, it's just doing the same thing. I feel like it's adding another rung to the ladder for people to aspire to, or to prove that actually the endurance element can come into it. So I set off on a 5 hour 50K. I was on pace until about 26K in, when I started cramping in places I'd never cramped before without any issues with salt bounce or anything. But I think physiologically at that point, the redlining and the effect of the mile just started to make my body say, no more, please no more, please no more. So I soldiered on to like a 4 hour, and I think I did 4:42, 44K or something. And then it was like 10 p.m. and I had work the next day. So I had to call it a day there. But it was a case of just keep going as far as I can, because it doesn't really matter now. Get to a marathon. So I ended up covering 500-pound squat, a 4:58 mile, and a marathon in the same day, but went into a physiological state of fatigue that I can't imagine many people have been in running a marathon before, because I was under the influence of a complete and utter red line beyond belief. So it was fascinating. It would have been good to have like Moxie readings on me and stuff like that, because I was confused as to why my legs felt the way they did. It was something new to me, and I've felt lots of painful sensations from previous ultra endurance challenges, but my adductor started cramping, my hip flexor started cramping.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it was places that I thought, this is new. I don't like this. From a personal perspective, that kind of put me in that affirmed me as a competent hybrid, in the sense that it was reported on by Men's Health Global, CrossFit Games shared it on all their accounts, Barbend did a series of articles on it, and on me as an individual, which was cool. But it went to all corners of the world, of the internet. Running forums were just slating my pacer, saying that I ran. What was it? It was I think my 80-year-old grandma could run better than him, having only watched the last lap. So it just goes to show the context that these people have. But it was good, because it put a nail in that argument that you can't do these things, because you can. And all I did was respecify my training for 6 weeks to get there, which just shows that if you just sit training across these disciplines and you're willing to drop some things temporarily in the knowledge you'll get them back, you can quickly specialize into anything that you set your mind to within a certain limit. Because I know, as long as I stay injury free, I tend to say I'm 3 months out from a conventional event, a conventional challenge. If I said I was going to go and do a world first fastest known time or something, obviously it's more than 3 months out from that. But if I said I wanted to do an Ironman in 3 months, I'd be able to do it. If I want to run 100 mile in 3 months, I'd be able to do it. If I want to do a powerlifting competition, I'd be able to do it. I'd be able to do it at a level that I'd be happy with across the board. I'm not going to win races. I'm not going to set records, but I'd like to think at the finishing line, I'd be the person with the biggest squat, because I also enjoy squatting and things like that. But it's not a, oh, look at me attitude that I take to it. It's I enjoy doing these things and I enjoy balancing them. And I think the ability to be able to do these things at a level that you're happy with and are excited by, rather than just doing it because you have to, is the difference. Because so many endurance athletes resent their strength training and they're just doing lateral hops thinking that's S&C. It's not. It's just dynamic plyos. They're not actually developing you in any way. In the same vein that you, for example, would have been training, busting a gut week in, week out for your bodybuilding stuff, but the thought of running a steady 5K would have given you the fear, I'd imagine.
Very much.
Whereas meeting in the middle, but most importantly, each discipline having its own inherent merits for me is very valuable. And the endurance stuff I'll never drop now, because it's my time to switch off. My low heart rate, steady state stuff on Saturdays is my time to switch off and be alone with my thoughts. And that's very valuable. And the noise of the Western world, it's very nice to just be out in the areas around me on the bike, on my feet, and just to be alone with my thoughts, the scenery and the sounds around me. Because you don't often get to do that these days.
Yeah. So tell us about, you've been quite open regarding, your battle, your personal battle with mental health, and you did leading on to, I think that led on to your Ben Nevis challenge. Is that Project Vertical?
Yep. So I'll try and be as succinct as I can because this story has been told in plenty of places before, but I left school with heaps of ambition, heaps of drive, and unhealthy levels of passion for success, but very conventional, traditional metrics of success, shall we say. So the uni I could go to, the job that would get me, the car that would get me, the house that would get me, the promotion that would get me, the position, the title that would get me, et cetera, et cetera. All these things that were kind of sold as data pieces within the school as to what you should aspire to be.
The dream, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went to university and I had 9 contact hours a week. It was just to piss up and I felt very, very underwhelmed. I was surrounded by people that were lovely, but not like-minded, not friends for life, as it were. And I just knew very quickly that I was dealt a bad hand. Eventually made friends at another college, but by the time I did, they'd already signed for houses in second year. So I was faced with the decision of living in Durham alone in private halls in my second year, or living in Newcastle with friends from Edinburgh. And I chose the latter because at this point I'd been suffering with what's been retrospectively diagnosed as depression for almost 6 months. And
sorry to interrupt. So were you exercising, training, and doing everything, not that you do now, but similar kind of versatility through all this, Fergus?
Yeah, so the powerlifting was what I did then, but I turned up to Durham wanting to try and excel in that. I was just about to head off to Las Vegas in 2015 to compete in the GPC Worlds. So it was a big focus for me. I mean, I was drinking, I was acting like a normal kid my age, but with the focus of powerlifting. But the gym at Durham had 1 squat rack, unless you were in one of the performance teams where you had access to this mega gym. But there were no independent gyms in Durham. There was only 1 university gym and it had a single squat rack and 160 kilos of weights. So I had to fight like fuck to get any extra stuff. I tried to start a powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding society and was told there was no space and that they wouldn't give it the time in the performance suite. So there was no gain there. So from the off, I was kind of in suboptimal circumstances from my own training, but the training was a big constant. If I hadn't had the training, things would have got a lot worse, a lot quicker, because it was the only purpose that I had each and every day. Because there was no one around me that I felt like I got on with. There was no one near me that I felt like I could interact with. If there was somebody that I wanted to go for a pint or a coffee with, there wasn't anyone that I could call straight away. But all my friends at other universities that work less hard than me at school were having these great times, and a bit of bitterness started to manifest. And that just slowly got worse and worse because I had set a very, very clear roadmap out of school for the rest of my life. And the second that I deviated from that roadmap, I started to feel like a failure. And rather than thinking, okay, change the roadmap, I thought, well, that's it. You've cocked up. You're useless now, mate. That's not how you should approach things, because I was just so rigid and so dogmatic about the way I did things. And
was that pressure you put on yourself, Fergus, you think, or do you think it's societal pressure?
It was a desire to fulfill the ambitions that I'd set for myself, because I felt that I was capable of doing them and had a complete and utter faith in myself. And it came from, I was almost expelled from my first school, actually, just for being so incredibly non-engaged. Like, I just wouldn't do any homework. I'd fall asleep in lessons. I'd just play Modern Warfare 2 in the evenings. I was taking a piss out of my parents for the support that they were giving me throughout all this. And I was almost expelled. My parents were told, take him elsewhere or we'll get rid of him. So they moved me to a school with smaller class sizes, et cetera, et cetera. And I then found a bit more of a community in rugby because it was a smaller school. I got a bit more holistic help, pastoral help around the learning side of things. And then for my GCSEs, I'd say I learned how to learn and went from a kid that wasn't going to get any GCSEs to someone that got 8 A's and 2 A stars, I think. So I learned how to learn. Then I found health and fitness from a self-driven point of view and became very, very, very at peace with the metric system of adding weight to the bar, shaving time off the time trials, etc., week by week by week by week. And that then helped me work like mad at 17, 18 years old. I mean, in my year at school, it was cool to be really hardworking and driven and with ambitions to be successful, not weird. So we were all working like mad for exams, and we were all at the gym at 6:30 in the morning, and we all found this real rhythm. But it was at the point where it was almost institutionalized, where the real world didn't cater for this sort of existence unless you were in the military or in a high-flying city job as a senior partner. Yet we were 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
We were doing the things that were spoken about now as habits that we should all be forming, that we found by accident just because it fit around our lifestyle. And it was a boarding school I went to, so we were up at 6:30 every day to go to the gym. We were then at breakfast. We were then we had periods during the day, and like in our free periods, we were all in our rooms working heads down. It wasn't like dicking about all this stuff, because we all got this taste of taking the control of hard work and seeing the results. So I became hell-bent on trying to get into Oxford, didn't get in with the interview, and that was the first knock that I had, but ended up going to Durham, as that was the next best university. Not the university I wanted to go to. I hadn't even looked, I hadn't even been to it, but it was the next best. So I thought that's the right option. Why would anyone not go to the best university they could do, Fergus?
Yep.
So I think my turnaround from a useless kid to a kid that got a taste for self-driven improvement made me hell-bent on fulfilling this roadmap that I'd set for myself. And I was led down the path of believing that the way to do that was to go to the best university you could, to get the best job that you could, which meant that you could then develop through the rat race the best that you could. And that roadmap ultimately meant that the first hurdle I was dealt, which was a less than ideal situation circumstantially at university, I then started to hit the slippery slope of self-destruction, really, where all I had to do was be honest about the way that I was feeling and how I was, the situation that I was in from a few weeks in.
Yep.
And it could have been very different, but because I was a bloke, because I was the successful one, because I was the hardworking one, because I was the one that was up every day doing all these things and had all these ambitions, if I admitted that, I'd be weak, I'd be less strong, I'd be letting down my own expectations, letting down other people's expectations of me. And that would make me a laughingstock, that would make me a freak, that would make me a failure. So I just kind of kept rolling with the punches for a while, putting a smile on whenever I saw people, had training, which for me was the only constant that I could rely on. Bought a Texas deadlift bar, which I stored in the stories they had there and everything. Like, it was just a huge part of my life. Training for powerlifting still, and then exams rolled around for second year and everybody's timetable changed. I wasn't seeing my friends very often. They were on doing this weird thing where you start work at 11 p.m, nail loads of caffeine and finish at 6 a.m. for no real reason other than it's what people seem to do. Whereas I wasn't doing that. But then I realized that a week had gone by, Sunday to Sunday, where I hadn't actually said a word out loud to another human being other than a cashier, a barista, a train conductor, the sort of service staff, I guess, that were around me that were offering a transaction rather than a human interaction. That was the difference. And I realized a week had gone by. And then not long after that, my previous perception of depression, mental health in general, was that it was a made up thing, an excuse that people that wanted to avoid responsibility or to get out of pushing themselves had in the cookie jar to talk about if they needed to. And then I started to struggle to eat, struggle to sleep. I was getting split in half by warm-up weights at the gym that I should be able to do with my eyes closed for sets of 25. And it then became overwhelmingly real. And that made me even more fearful of exposing myself as a failure, of exposing how I felt, because I was actually being physically affected by my own head, which to me at that point was a ridiculous thing to think, because it just was so nonsensical as this bloke that was very ambitious, very self-driven, etc., etc. And the rest of the memory is a little bit blurry around it, but ultimately that got worse and worse. I continued to not do anything about it. And then early May of 2016, swallowed as many pills as I could get my hands on, drank what was, I think, about a litre of spirit, and hoped to find peace. And I say find peace rather than to die, because I think I consciously avoided the reality of what my intentions were, because all I wanted was a break from my own mind. And I knew what that entailed, but if I accepted what that entailed, then I'd be confronting what I would be leaving behind. And that might be an incentive for me not to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted peace. I didn't want to die. That's the difference. And I came around in a puddle of my own vomit, however many hours later, barely conscious, to the point where I was cognitively conscious, but physically I still wasn't there, because I was still highly, highly intoxicated and under the influence of all these things I'd ingested. And my first feeling was one of like fury, because the only thing I'd done to take initiative in the situation and try and get me out of the situation that I'd been in had failed. I was fallen short. So I felt even more useless than I had done previously, but started to become a bit more cognitive again. And the next 2 days, I can't really remember, but I know that not long afterwards, I got a message from one of my friends, Andy, who's in Edinburgh, sent me a message saying, I'm getting a puppy from this litter next week, you in? And he was joking. I was on a student loan income. Like, I didn't have a property of my own, etc. He was just taking the piss, just kind of flexing on me that he was getting a puppy. And in the back of my mind, I thought, yes, that's absolutely what I need. And the obvious things are, it gave me structure, routine, responsibility, a sense of purpose, etc. But that all came afterwards. I think the first thing that I thought in the back of my mind was, that's a heartbeat and I need that. So a week later, I'd cleared out my student loan and I had a 14-week-old French bulldog, for the reason being that I was just craving some sort of companionship, some sort of heartbeat in the room with me to make me feel like I wasn't so isolated and alone. And slowly but surely, in the Northeast, you know what people are like. They're very friendly. Dog people talk to people. And I was just walking Odie and people would just talk about him, just say, oh, how's he getting on? Is he toilet trained? Where are you walking him? All this stuff. And that allowed me to start having conversations with people again and feel much less alone. And it wasn't like I was saying, oh, I've attempted suicide, I've felt depressed, to these strangers. They were just asking how the dog was getting on. And what that did was it allowed me to get back a sense of self and actually talk to people again and feel like I was coming out of this hole. And repeatedly, that was a huge, huge shift. And then I was walking Odie one day off the lead in Jesmond Dean, which is just a lovely little green area in Jesmond in the Northeast.
Very well.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah,
And I had him off the lead, and
cool.
because he was too scared to be far away from me, so we were just chilling, just walking in the sun. And I just said things out loud like, "We're going to be okay, aren't we, pig?" And when I said them, I kind of like it was like I was reaching out to kind of like put them back in and like hide them again and suppress them, because I didn't want to acknowledge that I hadn't been okay. And saying these things out loud to Odie, who was now my best mate, was the first time that I'd actually internalized and vocalized them to the point where I could actually then start to process the information and do something about it, rather than just do my best to repress it. And that basically then saw me through to summer, where I worked a bar job in Edinburgh. I was back around my friends, and I was just happy to be happy again, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't my true self. I was drinking a lot more than I should. My training was very much a holding pattern. I was just doing it. I didn't have any real ambitions, but I knew it was important to me. I was consistently late to work. Not that it really mattered working at a cocktail bar, but it was just good to be talking to people, being around people, being in a busy environment again. And then went back to university for my third year and had a great year. And then left uni, went straight to London, did Heineken UK's graduate scheme, finished with that and went into a full-time role. And then between then, however, it was Christmas time, where my mum had adamantly said she never wanted a dog. The family were never getting a dog. And here I was at Christmas time, seeing my family with a dog. And the elephant in the room, or the pig dog / French bulldog in the room, came up. And I had to, it wasn't a choice to explain the situation I'd been in, but I felt I had to for the sake of justification. But it wasn't something that really scared me, because I was so proud of the fact that Odie he had no cognitive part to play, but he was the reason that I was still here, I guess, in many ways, because I don't know what would have happened had I not found that outlet. Because let's not forget, Odie was just another way for me to repress how I was feeling to human beings, because he was just another distraction technique to start with anyway. So I explained that, and it was the first time I'd said out loud to another human being how I'd probably been feeling and what that had entailed with the suicide attempt. So that was liberating, and that allowed me to really start feeling like myself again, slowly but surely. Then I was caught amidst a policy change in London for the company I was working for, which basically meant that I couldn't do my job properly because of the hierarchy of command for certain policies to be changed. And it was just pissing me off. I felt like I had no sense of purpose. I'd kept bringing it up, nothing changed. So I felt like my KPIs couldn't be met, but I was still being targeted on them, even though that I was physically unable to hit them because of reasons that were out of my control. And I then just opened my laptop one day and I got hit with this white noise of stress that just, I recognized just this sort of irrational, incomprehensible, I need peace sort of thing. And I shut the laptop and thought, okay, you've been here before. What were you missing last time? You were missing a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment, and you didn't have anyone that you could rely on. You've got a lot more now, and you've got a lot more self-awareness than you had then, but what you're missing a sense of fulfillment and purpose. So find one. what are you good at? I'm good at squatting. I was squatting 200. I think I squatted 272.5 kilos in the gym at that point. It was high. It was a high 600 pounds, but it was 600 pounds nonetheless. I'd done 260 in comp. And I thought, okay, charity, what can you do? Cancer research, people do stuff for that maybe, but maybe you could do it for a men's mental health or something like that charity. Oh, Movember, done stuff with them for the rugby in the past. And then thought, yeah, I'll look them up. Cult status, that's kind of cool. Again, I think at first I thought cult status, maybe that's a way of disguising the reality of what you're actually talking about with cool t-shirts and mustaches. But I thought rugby community is an easy one to talk about. Phone Movember said, look, I would like to try and squat 500,000 kilos in 24 hours to represent the 500,000 male suicides globally every year. And I said, okay, not a phone call we were expecting, but we're with you on it. And at that point, I basically just started a completely made up, let's see what happens, PR campaign to try and push this out there. So I started by saying, this is what I'm doing on this date for men's mental health and suicide prevention. Donate if you can. 2 weeks went by and I had such an influx of messages from my own social circles, from people that I hadn't spoken to since primary school, etc., saying, I'm really glad you're doing this. It's something that's really important. And in the back of my mind, it made me realize that actually this is something people were crying out for, and that maybe I hadn't or was not the only one that had been feeling that way. And I ultimately got enough confidence from all those messages that it made me comfortable sharing my story publicly. So I spoke to Movember. They helped me come up with a bit of a press release just to distill down the details and the way to vocalize it. And then I just told my friends, told my family, and told my personal Facebook. I hadn't even, my social media at this point was just me, just some geezer with an Instagram account. It wasn't like a fitness account or anything. So my personal Instagram now was actually started off as an event page for this challenge.
Okay.
And then I charged through event number one. Long story short, sprained my patella tendon and slightly tore my MCL, 127,000 kilos in at about 3 a.m. But lying on the floor, crying my eyes out, realized that the process was much more important than the outcome. And that's what everybody's cut. Joe Marler was up at 3 a.m. watching it live and sent me a message saying, doesn't matter. 3 a.m. on a school night as well. So it was insane that people were, one, engaged, and two, they were sending me these messages saying, I don't care. It was all about the process. And I'd raised 25.5 grand just by having an idea and seeing how far I could push it. And it gave me the confidence that I could continue to do this. And I'd seen the impact it had. I'd had the messages from people saying, this has helped me in X way, Y way, etc. So year 2, I thought you can't go bigger, but you can go broader. And I like the idea of continuing to use the statistics to draw attention to the cause, but was using the physical challenges as a way of putting the statistics at the forefront of the challenges. So if you're interested in the physical side of things, you couldn't ignore the statistics. So 1st of November, I lunged 6,890 meters, which is the UK and Republic of Ireland suicide rate in 2018. Wow. And the furthest anyone has ever lunged. It's a very niche sport.
Man, what were your glutes? What were your glutes like the next day?
They were Instagram ready. Let's just say that. But they were intact. It was actually my quads. It was my quads that were ruined, but it was just tough. I think that took me about 4.5 hours. And then the 17th, I organized a 13-man, 13-hour workout at WIT in London. Basically just got as big a social media reach as a bunch of strong, seemingly tough lads in one room together to fight together for this cause. Put together a 13-hour workout that was offsetting 94 and 13, which is 94 male suicides a week, 13 a day. So it was like 94 burpees, 13 minutes on the assault bike, for example. That was how it looked. And we raised just shy of 15 grand in the day there. And then on the 29th and 30th, I ran 94 miles from Loch Lomond to Edinburgh to represent 94 male suicides a week, and ran into a sort of 150-person event that I'd organized at Murrayfield for local mental health charities, for local people to share their story. And 150 attendees came to listen to it for a 2-hour event that I run into. I was actually 15 minutes late to it, which was a bit bad on my part, but after 22 hours of running at this point, I forgave myself.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
But that again gave me confidence that not only are people on board, but people are willing to travel, people are willing to pay, people are willing to participate, etc., etc. So that continued to help with the building blocks. And then February of the following year, I started thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And the Scottish Mountains are very meaningful to me from a personal mental health point of view. It's where I find peace. It's where I can switch off. But the symbolism of the mountains also very relevant to all the messaging. And I started to think, what can I do with the mountains? I could do a full Monroe round, and then thought, actually, no, fuck that. That sounds awful. And it'll be really logistically challenging, and people will be able to do it much quicker than me. And then thought marathons. Ross Edgley pulled a car for a marathon. Somebody will have swam a marathon. Has anyone ever done one up the way? Lo and behold, no one had. So came up with the idea of Project Vertical, which was attempting the world's first vertical marathon, which is 26.2 miles of elevation gain of 42,200 meters. And the intention was to do that by ascending and descending Ben Nevis 32 times. And we had budget and volunteers for 11 days to do it, with the intention of finishing at 11 a.m. on the 11th to commemorate Remembrance Day, because we had a huge amount of support from the military community and some military brands. So we set off with this big focus campaign, got the backing of some key brands. The key things to mention here is Johnny, my business partner at Omnia, who's been my coach for the past 4 years, came on for this as part of the messaging being that we're better suffering through these things together. And the premise of the project was to encourage people to climb your own mountain. So our mountain was Ben Nevis, and yours could be getting out of bed in the morning. Yours could be making that phone call to quit your job. Yours could be taking on that first marathon. Whatever it was, we were trying to build on the message of the mountain, the uphill battles, the false summits, the highs, the lows, the peaks, the troughs, all these things. And that landed really well, which was great. And then long story short, again, we set off on the first within a storm, which saw minus 19 degrees at the top and up to 103 mile an hour winds, which is technically classed as hurricane standard of winds. So we set off on the first with the intention of getting 3 summits done, but we basically fought through the hardest 2 summits we've ever done in our life. Johnny had to rescue a girl down off the mountain on the second one. It was just chaos. And that claimed our souls on day 1, I think it's fair to say. So we went into day 2 pretty beaten up with the intention of doing another 3, but then just settled into 2s. And then just got slowly worse and worse as time went on, because our knees we had bursitis in our knees. I'd sprained my ankle. It was, I mean, we knew this would happen, and we prepared for these things, but it was just as they started to happen, it got harder and harder, which again, we knew would be the case. But then come day 11, my bursitis was so bad that I was medically told that we should probably rein it in on this day. And then another storm was coming in. So by the end of the time that we had allocated and the volunteers and the budget that we had covered just shy of 30,000 meters and done 22 summits of Ben Nevis in the 11 days. But most importantly, had an enormous amount of interaction. We had an email account set up for people to just send in words of encouragement or how they'd been interacting with the project from their end, anywhere in the world. And we'd had 630 emails to that, some ranging from, hey lads, hope everything's going well, thinking of you, cheers, Gaz, to one was 2,300 words or something, just insane. And we set that up as well in the knowledge that if we were ever really suffering and thinking this is shit, I want to stop, remind ourselves why we're doing this, because all it takes is one person saying this is helping me from my end and my perspective. And we opened it and thought, fuck it, let's carry on. Doesn't matter anymore. Look at this. This is brilliant. So finished the project having raised 47 grand, I think, 48 grand, which takes my total to, for the past 3 years, about 96 and a half, because we've had a few rolled in since then. But I think the total is, it's just shy of £100,000 for November, which is very exciting. But again, Project Vertical, people engage with it in the right way. It wasn't about us. It wasn't about the physical challenge. The physical challenge was a symbol for something bigger. And we just, we realized after day 2, the most important thing that we could do was keep showing up. And even though the easier and preferable thing to do, and we had a way out as well, because we knew on day 3 that we weren't going to get it done in the time. So we could say, oh, well, that's it. Game over. And the mountain rescue guys that were integral to the project in the end, they don't support, they have a blanket policy of not supporting charity projects because they get so many requests. They don't do it. But, and they've had a notoriously bad past of the coping mechanism being a glass of whiskey at the end of the night and everybody goes home. Whereas it was actually a paratrooper that joined. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but he joined and got back from a rescue one day and sat down and somebody was like, "You all right?" And he was like, "No, I'm fucking not at all. Not at all. None of us are. And we're not talking about it." And a paratrooper who was seemingly the fittest, hardest, hardiest, happiest bloke in the troop just got them all talking about it a bit more. So they came to us and offered us the van, everything, unending support. And they said what they were so sold on was the fact that when we knew that we could just stop because we'd kind of fallen short of where we set ourselves to go, we thought, well, let's just keep going, keep showing up, because if we quit, then we're succumbing to the changing circumstances. And that's exactly what caught me out when I was suffering from depression in the first place. So I tried to, on social media, I tried to extract a lesson a day from every day that we did. And I think that went down well. to distill it to translatable terms. And it was a life-changing, profound experience, to be honest. I mean, it was just a bunch of lads for 11 days in the Highlands doing a very, very simple primal mission of get up and down the hill. Don't forget to eat, don't forget to drink. And we were laughing like children about the stupidest things. Humor got weird, humor got dark, humor got questionable. but it was just brilliant, because it was just such a simple, it was men coming together completely honestly, completely transparently. And we effectively managed ourselves. We effectively managed the team better because of doing so. And I think that all shone through really well in the documentary that was produced as well. And again, that gave me the confidence that big statements can be made in this space. And it's something I'm going to continue doing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a summary of the 3 years and the charity side of things. But it all comes from me knowing that I made a series of mistakes that other people don't have to make. The more that I can reinforce the fact that here I am suffering through things that might seem very challenging, ostensibly, i.e. tough, hard, seemingly you need to be strong to get through, whilst at the same time being very open and honest about the fact that that doesn't make me any less of a man. It actually makes me more of a man. It makes me stronger being able to talk about these things honestly and transparently.
Wow. Listen, I think there's so many things to unpick there, but I guess one place I'd like to go to is, your reminder of just how hard it can be to be young. I think when you get older and, when you grow up and when you embark on a career or family, you forget just how alienating and confusing and, kind of terrifying it can be to be young and not know what's coming. But I've set yourself so many expectations about what you should and shouldn't do. And this belief that you need to know what you're going to do at 16. And if you don't know, then you're going to struggle in life and you're not going to get to where you want to get to. And, as someone who's got I've got a son and a daughter, but I've got a 6-year-old son, and thought of him being in your position and in your predicament, made me, and does make me quite emotional, to be fair. And I think, there's a really good kind of productivity movement now and self-development around. I think the great thing about where it's heading is that, productivity is not productivity all the time. It's not relentless push forward to be the best all the single time at the expense of emotional well-being. The new kind of productivity, and which is really why we set up Human 24, is that there's productivity and there's ambition and there's accountability and responsibility. But in order to have all that, you better have your emotional wellness and your emotional well-being and have things in place in your life that can help you, be the best you can be, during the day and in your life. But you need to have that support mentally, physically, and emotionally. And it's not just about churning forward at 100 miles an hour, because if you do that, then, you can come to an abrupt end. And I think that kind of narrative around, young, that's 16 to, for me, 16 to, well, for me, it was probably 13, 14 to 21-year-old time in my life. It's easy to forget, but you look back and your kind of memories takes me back, and it is terrifying. It's, and it's easy to make, short-term decisions or long-term decisions for short-term problems, because they're going to, by the time you don't know the short-term, because everything feels like there's nowhere to go. Everything feels like it's failed. That's it. You're always told, do well in your exams or you won't do anything in life. And that's got to change at a school level. And moving into that I guess is what you're starting to try and do in schools with discussions. You're taking the human element of, listen, there's things to do around work that form good habits, and working hard and doing exams and achieving are good habits, but there's so much more about it. And you can't possibly be cognitively, mentally, emotionally developed at 16. It took me, Fergus, till I was 28 before I knew what I wanted to do in life. Now, 16, that's almost half the time before. I had absolutely no idea, yet you're told you need to.
Yeah. It's, I mean, you mentioned your kids there, and one of the biggest drivers for me now is as the Fergus, the father in the future, and the kids that do not yet exist that I hope to have, I'm terrified of them growing up in a society or a culture that allows them to get to the stage that I did, because I was a product of that society and that culture. And yes, it was self-destructive, but I had very caring family, went to a great school, did all the right things, but there I was. So that's one of my biggest drivers, which I think is something that I need to remind myself of sometimes, because I can only be as you said, I can only be as useful as I am stable, and that stability comes from, I think productivity for me is efficiency more than it is, because productivity is almost viewed as being busy all the time, when in reality, being busy all the time could actually be a contraindication of
absolutely
productivity. And productivity to me now, and success to me now, is my ability to do the things that I enjoy doing with the people that I enjoy doing them with.
Yep.
So the more time I get to spend doing those things, the more successful I am. But the analogy I use, if for anyone that's seen Le Mans, the film, there was a big thing made about the Ferrari rev counter and how if it's sitting at a certain point for a long, long time, you're going to be very good and you're going to be successful, you're going to see it through. But if you hold it too far above that red counter into that red for a little bit, the whole car falls apart and then it's got to be rebuilt. You go in and you lose the race. And that's the way that I view it. And especially the messaging to the kids is, look, here I am, someone that was doing all the right things, had all the right intentions, went to a great school, had loving parents, had all these privileged things in front of me. Yet these are the mistakes that I made, and how that you can maybe consider them in this way to do them differently. And look, I'm not the oracle. I don't have all the answers. I don't even give much advice, to be honest. All I do is say, this is what I did. This is what I did wrong. This is what I do now. Take from that what you will. But as a kid, I didn't have anyone. As you said, I had people telling me, here's the path that you need to follow in life. Do it or you're a dickhead, was basically the way it was communicated to me. Yeah. Whereas I academically was an Oxbridge candidate for my school, whereas now the corporate world makes me just incredibly unenthused. It doesn't appeal to me at all. And I'm working predominantly in the fitness industry and going into a public speaking industry alongside performing as an athlete. Nothing that I went to Oxbridge for would have really helped me with any of that, aside from maybe some more developed critical thinking or a better network. But I was hell bent on getting there because that was the direction that I was told I needed to go in. So I don't want it to. The challenge and the nuance is not discouraging kids from working hard and pursuing things, but the narrative needs to be, you need to be pursuing the right things for you rather than the right things for the data entry for the schools, for the Russell Group candidates, or what you're going to be able to put in your CV to impress the Big Four. It's just it doesn't offer any value to you as an individual. And if we spend the majority of our lives doing our day job, we should all be exploring ways to make that something that we enjoy and that gives us a sense of fulfillment. I don't have the answers, but you're right. Kids need to understand that success doesn't come from the exam grades. It comes from better understanding themselves and what direction they can use the things that they learn and take it forwards with.
Cool. Listen, getting short on time. Last question. What's next? What's next for Fergus Crawley?
So in 9 days, Christ. 9 days, I've got the Keltman Extreme Triathlon, which is part of the Extreme Triathlon World Tour, which are basically a series of races in very extreme, very remote part of the world. Single world, there's only one. As far as I'm aware, we could go down a rabbit hole there.
We could do, yeah. I've been down there, Fergus. I've been down there many times.
Yeah, it's basically an Ironman distance triathlon, but with stupid amounts of elevation in very cold water with loads of jellyfish. The bike is 22 kilometers longer than an Ironman, and the marathon is over 2 Monroes with 1,800 meters of elevation gain. So it's just a brutal race in what can be anything from 22 degrees and sun to sleet, snow, and 4 degrees weather. So it's a real mix of just the extreme environment. And I've got a place on every single one of those races for the next 3 years, the 17 of them around the world. If I can get to Norway, I'm doing the Norseman on the 7th of August, which is known and notoriously known as the hardest triathlon in the world. But I'm going to be doing all this whilst maintaining my top end strength. There's a few other things going on in the background to be determined, but then there was a big project coming in January, the details of which that I cannot share, but I think I can confidently say it will be the single biggest mental health focused event challenge the UK has ever seen. And it's going to have a nationwide opportunity for engagement, interaction over a long period of time. And then beyond that, the hope is to translate that into a more permanent offering to better facilitate the conversations that we've been having today, to help people better understand and to explore their support networks, explore what they want to do, what direction they want to take, and just give people a bit more confidence to have that conversation. And then alongside that, keep building the businesses, keep training, and keep seeing what comes out of the woodwork, because it's every week's exciting at the moment, which is great, but it's just learning to spin the right plates at the right time is my challenge at the moment. So we'll see.
Awesome. Listen, it's been great speaking to you. Yeah, I love what you're about and what you're doing and what you're talking about, you know, with and kind of backing up with your actions as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan. We're a big fan of you guys. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate you giving us that time today. All the best for 9 days.
Yes.
11 days. And
yes. I'm already looking at the
I'll get back to training.
Very speculative weather forecast 9 days out, which I'll be doing 3 times a day, every day. But no, thanks for having me and thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thank you, Fergus. Take care, mate. Bye-bye.